honor, but without chastity there is no honor possible for her, and with it there is honor, though all else be lacking. This quotation from Kelso's book. These dual ideas of education and virginity collide in Hortensio's ill-fated attempt at the tutoring of Kate. At first glance, it appears to be just another scene of Kate being forward. Marvin Prim sums up the commonly accepted view of Kate when he writes that Kate skates everyone in sight, especially Petruchio. She is, after all, the shrew in the theatrical reality of the play, and she goes beyond mere threats and verbal abuse and commits what amounts to mayhem. What Crims neglects to mention is that in every example of Kate skating someone, she is directly provoked in some way. Before Kate utters a single line in the play, she is verbally assaulted by Hortensio, and the trend only continues from there. Baptista not only ignores these verbal assaults on his eldest daughter, he participates in them in his own way. Many of Baptista's lines sound as if he has only one daughter rather than two, and lines like these are invariably followed by an outburst from Kate. If Kate Shrewish lines are attributed to self-defense, then it becomes important to look at her actions as a means to determine whether or not Kate is truly a shrew, or in fact a nearly ideal Elizabethan woman. That tutoring scene is the most revealing moment. This scene is almost entirely consistent throughout numerous editions of this play. The Folio, the 1631 Quarto, John Lacey's Sawney the Scott adaptation, David Garrick's 1756 revival, and J.P. Kemble's version all include a variation of this scene. In short, Hortensio attempts to tutor Kate to play the lute. Kate, appearing to be a shrew, smashes his head through the lute. The simple scene, with careful attention to word choice and Elizabethan symbolism, is far more intriguing. The scene begins with Baptista asking Hortensio if he cannot break her to the lute. Hortensio responds that she has broke the lute to me. This exchange will hold more meaning when looking at Hortensio's description of the events leading up to this assault. Hortensio states that he told Kate that he, quote, mistook her frets, and that he, quote, bowed her hands to teach her fingering. Frets and fingering become key terms for the purposes of our interpretation. Both terms have ultimate definitions with sexual undertones. Frets can be identified as agitation of mind, a ruffled condition of temper, irritation, but also passion, vexation, querulous or peevish utterance. It can also be defined as to rub, chafe, or to make pass by rubbing. Fingering also has a definition beyond the obvious musical interpretation. To lay the fingers upon or touch with a view to plunder, to pilfer, to filch. Also to take or remove something fraudulently is another 16th century definition of that word. Fingering also has a definition, Hortensio seems to have laid his hands on Kate and, based on accepted 16th century definitions of frets and fingering, may have attempted to do something more. Kate, defending her purity, smashes Hortensio with the lute. Which brings us to the lute, which is a very specific instrument, almost certainly intentionally placed. Shakespeare made reference to lutes 19 times in 15 lines in 11 different plays, according to the Shakespeare Concordance. All but one of these references clearly refers to love and the lute's association with love. What's more, the lute as an instrument was a very recognizable symbol. Quote, the lute is rich not only in repertoire but in symbolism. From ancient times it symbolized youth and love. Conversely, it could be an emblem of lust or lasciviousness in the hands of an older man. It symbolized scandal and degeneracy. Lute historian Douglas Elton Smith went even further, saying that, since the Renaissance mind thought far more in symbolic or allegorical terms than does our own, scenes depicting musicians and instruments cannot be taken literally. The symbolic nature of the Renaissance mind can easily be seen through symbolic iconography. Elizabethan artists would frequently include items of symbolic value in portraiture, and one of the most famous examples is the Hilliard portrait of Queen Elizabeth playing the lute. In this painting, Elizabeth is almost dwarfed by the prominent lute included in the portrait. This Hilliard miniature was unique in depicting Elizabeth playing a musical instrument, and was so finely crafted that sitting by the Queen was likely, according to sources. The mere presence of the lute gives the viewer pause, as it, unlike any other extant Renaissance miniature, depicts activity and provides a glimpse of the private life of the Queen. Including such a large lute would have carried symbolic significance, serving as a not-so-subtle statement confirming the youth and purity of the Virgin Queen Elizabeth, who was quite conscious of ensuring her reputation of youthful vigor and chastity. This is my high-tech teaching technique here. This chastity, the pinnacle of Renaissance womanhood, becomes synonymous with the lute in both art and drama. In Hortensio's hands, however, the lute would have a far different connotation. In Chapter 8 of Julia Craig McFeely's Oxford dissertation, she discusses the lute as part of a language of images, noting that one of the main reasons for the decline in popularity of the lute in England was its association with its negative symbolism, which made it a metaphor for sex. Based on this language of images, as well as Shakespeare's repeated use of the lute in that context, it becomes clear that the lute may be read as an extended metaphor for Kate's virginity. Kate's use of the lute follows this trend. She does not simply hit Hortensio over the head with it. Every version is an agreement, save for one, the enigmatic taming of a shrew, which is the only one to actually show the encounter between Kate and the Hortensio character, Valeria. Valeria asks Kate to play the lute. When Kate refuses, insisting that she does not take delight in that instrument, Valeria says, quote, "I would, sweet mistress, that it lay in me to help you to that thing that you're to like." The words lay, delight, and thing all carry sexual connotations and imply a romantic, if not lascivious advance. Not surprisingly, it is after this line that Kate becomes aggressive, often threatening to bash the lute over Valeria's head. Later in the same exchange, Kate becomes tolerable, until Valeria, claiming that he was being mocked and just looking for music, asks her to play a little. Kate agrees, begins to play a song, but it doesn't take long for Valeria to stop her and inform her that her claim was false. Kate tells him to mend her playing himself, at which point Valeria says, "What do you bid me kiss your ass?" This time, there can be no mistaking the sexual overtones. Kate again threatens to bash the lute over his head before throwing him out. Oddly, she doesn't actually hit him with the lute in this one version, but in every other version, she does hit him, sending his head through the lute. Again, the lute being a clear symbol of love or carnal desire. Shakespeare was never above making humor relating to women's virginity or the breaking thereof, and taking into account Shakespeare's demonstrated humor, the sexual terminology throughout numerous versions of this scene, and the line where Hortensio admits defeat in breaking her to the lute because she had broken the lute to him, it is not out of the realm to suggest that the lute could be a symbol of Kate's virginity, and Kate's act would not then be a forward act, but one of honor, defending that which the ideal Renaissance woman held so dear. Petruchio's response was to be pleased at hearing the news of this tale. He had received word that his chosen wife protected her honor and virginal wealth. Kate's grandest moment is her final speech, the one that everyone's obsessed with, where the concept of unmasking and the conflict between the sisters comes to its ultimate conclusion. Like much of the play, the final speech is full of ambiguity. Kate does not reject her own strong personality. She delivers a vivid, direct speech castigating one or both of the other newlywed wives. This is supposed to be her grand unveiling as a new woman, and she appears just as spirited as ever. To complicate matters further, we aren't completely sure to whom she is even delivering the speech. While Petruchio does tell Kate to correct these headstrong women, and he specifically tells Kate to begin with her. It seems clear that he's referring to the widow, but it's not directly spelled out, and it seems more logical from a certain standpoint to assume that Petruchio is referring to Bianca. The widow makes her one of her earliest appearances in the scene, and it seems unlikely for her to be a target of such a culminating speech. It makes far more sense to be the target as Bianca, because Petruchio, having removed Kate from the presence of Bianca and Baptista, would see this as the ultimate test of Kate's unmasking. It would prove that Kate could speak her mind rather than simply react to the unflattering comments of her family. David Garrett's version and J.P. Campbell's revival shows Kate directing the speech to Bianca and not the widow at all. The content of the speech is just as relevant as the target. Kate layers her speech to Bianca with biblical allusions from Paul's letter to the Ephesians and from Peter. The reference to Paul, seen in Act 5, Scene 2, lines 22 to 28, is the more revealing. Paul's letter to the Ephesians deals with proper religious behavior on earth and includes numerous ethical responsibilities. This sets up a clear contrast to Bianca, who delights in the book of love and heroides. Kate is essentially demonstrating the true Elizabethan womanly ideal for her audience of former tormentors, women who spurned the ideal and men who followed their eyes rather than their minds. She powerfully shows that, unlike her sister, she has restricted herself to the texts and behaviors of an ideal Renaissance woman. School teachers have difficulty with the play in large part due to the suddenness and shocking change in Kate's personality. It is no coincidence that the vast majority of studies on Kate begin with her final speech. It is my contention, however, that the speech can best be understood after paying careful attention to Kate's disastrous tutoring scene. She is verbally and physically assaulted throughout the play, largely due to the fact that, much like a Quixote character, she embodies a kind of idyllic lifestyle in a world that is not prepared to receive that lifestyle. In embodying the ideal, Kate puts herself at odds with the masculine community around her, who may think that they want the ardent virgin, but in actuality desire and chase the submissive blow-up doll that Bianca appears to be. The final speech, then, can be viewed as a validation of Kate's idealistic purity. She alone provided the ideal, and both Lucentio and Hortensio wound up with shrews. By reading the play through these lenses of Renaissance pedagogy and symbolic iconography, it becomes possible to see this play as something more than a masterpiece of misogyny. The comedy comes not from the violence and the misogyny against Kate, but rather from Kate's existence as this ideal woman in a world that is anything but ideal. She exists in a sort of permanent state of comitatus crisis. It can be properly viewed as a play about the construction of identity and the negative impact that can occur when someone is surrounded by people who say one thing and do something else. It becomes a play not about abuse, but about how to escape from abuse. And in short, it becomes a play that ties into many of the issues facing our students, while also offering up a multitude of educational opportunities for teaching art, symbolism, irony, and history.